Look at all those burning cows.
I'm proud of that work.
That's really good work. What a fucking weirdo module, huh?
Can't wait to talk about it. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG Podcast. I am Clayton.
I'm Jordan.
Before we get started, you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/alienfamiliar. And if you would like to help us out with supporting the show, you can do so at patreon.com/alienfamiliarmedia. So if you enjoy our content and would like to help us out with hosting costs, any help you would be able to give us would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're doing another Dicebag Disco. We're going to be going over a number of topics, the exact number and the nature of which we don't exactly know at this point, because we're going to be randomly rolling on a D12 chart to see what topics we talk about today. And so I don't have anything I need to get off my chest before we get started. So, Jordan, you want to go ahead and we'll roll and see what we come up with?
Are you rolling or am I?
Well, let's alternate. I'll roll the first one, and then whenever we get to the second one, you can roll.
Hit it.
And it looks like I rolled an 8, which is character class does not equal character personality. This is something that just annoys me a lot, particularly whenever people who aren't all that familiar with role playing, whenever you get into the game, you have these tropes in your mind about what different characters act like. And this is pulling from a variety of media where different people, like different tropes of characters have certain personality types associated with them. And in this vein, there are several classes in D&D that seems like, regardless of what's going on, most of the people who play these particular classes fall back onto these tropes whenever they are initially coming up with the ideas for their characters. I know that I have personally used pretty much every single one of these at some point in my D&D career, but the reason why it annoys me is because I've played with some people over the years who they're no longer, I would not consider them to be still the novice type of players, but whenever it comes to these types of characters, they just kind of always fall back on the tropes of these very simple tropes associated with the classes, and they don't really play the characters beyond that. Probably the most common one that you see, and definitely memes carry this. Well, I say all this, and then I start thinking of examples of why others would be even more so. But I would say paladins and bards are probably the two classes that kind of have this stigma associated with them. Paladins being the stereotypical knight in shining armor, but in play they end up being basically lawful stupid, is how I've seen it described, and how I would very much agree with. Bards being, particularly in the past few years in the meme sphere of D&D, the horny bard becoming even more of a problem than it has been in the past. Jordan, what's some experiences you've had with people who are playing a class as if it equals a personality for their players? And have you seen people who have been able to take it and go beyond it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have particular stories, but it always comes up in every single game somewhere or another. A monk is another one. Like, you always get the typical Shaolin monk archetype. The bard one is the one that really sticks out as being the one that's the most obnoxious. I think probably just about everybody is tired of the horny bard at this point. Maybe not. Maybe it's just me. And it's bizarre. This modern idea that we've come up with in D&D of what a bard is, like how far it is from the like the ancient Celtic bard. It's this weird horny minstrel character is just not a thing that ever existed before. I don't know, probably the 90s. Yeah, I noticed something on this list here. You've got bards, druids, paladins, and thieves. The only one of those that I'm not so sure about is thieves, because in my experience, I often see people trying to do a particular like subtype of thief. Maybe they're trying to do a burglar or a swashbuckler or pickpocket or some kind of con man, whatever it is. It seems like there's a good bit of variety of thieves, pirates, whatever. The others, the bard, druid, paladin, and I'd add monk to that, are pretty much one note every time I see one get played. And I also can't help but take note that these are later additions to the class list to Dungeons and Dragons. Original white books, OD&D, you get the fighter, the mage, and the magic user, and the cleric, right? And those, I think people tend to try to put some variety into when they play them. But it's these weird, like, sort of hybrid or, like, specialized kind of characters that I think fundamentally in the construction of the class, they're so pigeonholed. Like, there's the game itself doesn't leave a lot of room to do things with them. Barbarians are another one that's like a real bad case of just one note character all the time. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that a big part of it, excuse me, is that for some of these, we don't really have a broad media representation of what they are that could be something else. Like you mentioned, thieves is probably something that shouldn't be on this list. And yeah, thinking about it, I definitely agree that perhaps thieves is, I have definitely seen more thieves played differently by players who are new to the game. And if a player does start off playing thief tropes, there are so many thief tropes to go on that are in popular media that they have a large variety to pull from. Even if they are playing a very tropey character, they have so many other tropes to draw on. And I think you're right that like these other character classes, there's not a wide variety of examples to look at to get inspiration for, and that's why a lot of them just kind of come out being the same. The D&D movie just came out a couple months ago as of recording this episode, and at the time I was kind of shocked that the bard character was not a horny bard type in the movie.
I still haven't bothered to watch that thing.
If you can get it for free, I'd say watch it. We've heard some opinions ranging on that movie. I don't think I ever chimed in with my opinion, but there was nothing overtly wrong with the movie. It's a perfectly serviceable movie. It's just I thought it was very much a middle tier movie with some good performances in it.
I think back to the topic at hand, though, the ranger is also like an obvious one. That's a one note character. Every ranger winds up acting like Aragorn at some point or another. But obviously this is just a matter of taste. And sometimes you see people trying to take things in weird directions, but I think when you choose classes that are already kind of, so like narrowly defined, when you try to do things interesting with them, you often have to, or people seem to tend to try to overcompensate and do something really crazy with one of these very like boring kind of classes. From a game design perspective, I think this is a fine argument to make for having like very broad classes that have a lot of different ways to play them. versus these prescribed kinds of roles. It's another reason that I hate archetypes in 5e and any other game that uses that kind of system, is that like every time you hyper specialize and thematically kind of push people into these like funnels of not just character abilities, but also the role that they're supposed to be playing and the personality that they're supposed to be exhibiting. You're just eliminating options, and you're just setting up constraints as much as you are granting additional abilities. So I don't know. It's not my cup of tea personally.
I identified this as character class, but even classless systems, or at least systems that claim to be classless, kind of fall into this. To me, the biggest the game system that commits this more than any others is probably the White Wolf systems, because like looking at Vampire the Masquerade, every single one of your now I can't think of the term that they use for their
clans,
bloodlines, clans. Yeah, whenever you read the description of the clan, they paint every single one of them as this very broad stereotype, and whenever it comes to play, I have seen a few very good role players play against the clan type, but every game I've been in has been an overwhelming number of people playing exactly into their clan archetype, where to the point where you have a 5-minute interaction with their character and I immediately know for a fact what clan they are a part of. And part of this is can be laid at the feet of the storyteller in these types of games, because they also fall back on this whenever they're creating NPCs. And also I've had storytellers who just straight up, whenever you meet a character, like as part of the description, they will say what clan they are associated with it, as if it was something that was completely obvious and is going to tell you a whole lot about the character's personality as a type of shorthand. I guess what I'm kind of getting at this whole thing is this use of it as a shorthand and using it as a stereotype, and it leads to a lot of just sameness across a broad spectrum of games. If you play for long enough with any particular group, it's just something that you're going to see recurring at time after time after time, and it's just something that, personally, having been in the hobby for 25 years or so, it's just very stale for me at this point.
This is one of those areas of tabletop RPG design where I can kind of get a whiff of the stink of market forces influencing the actual structure of the game rules. I think that way back in the white box, you started with 3 classes, and then every supplement that they came out with, another class, another couple classes, couple more, so on. Getting people to buy these books to find more things that they could do with their characters as afforded them by the rules, when they could have conceivably done any of this stuff by just getting creative and talking to the DM. And, every version of D&D and every role-playing game that's inherited from that, that comes to mind, at least the big ones, are ones that follow the same kind of pattern, that you've got a handful of options, and then as the game matures, well, then you need a book for every one of those options. You need specializations within each of those options, and so on and so forth. You just start piling up the splat books, and then you retire the edition and print a new one and start the whole cycle all over again. I think that it's not. It doesn't lend itself, that whole tendency, to a game that is easy to pick up and leaves enough empty space for character creativity, for player creativity with a character. Because there's this weird like inverse relationship thing where it seems like the more the more explicitly listed options a character has in the book, the less creative space a player has to just try shit, because it just seems like it's, one of these other options that you didn't spend your points for or didn't level up high enough for yet, or whatever the fuck, pick the wrong race, whatever you want to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that kind of what I see you touching on is something that I get frustrated about in a lot of games, and that is that your powers aren't what makes your character cool. Like, being able to do cool things doesn't make your character cool. There are probably hundreds or thousands of comic book characters that just never launched because they had some cool powers, but then they just had nothing behind the character.
Yeah, and I think that there's a psychological thing that happens from players that the more specific bullet point powers that they have listed out on their sheet, the more they think that is the sum total of their options for handling stuff. And, if you look at like really early D&D character sheets, like Holmes Basic or whatever, there's barely anything on the page. There's your 6 ability scores. There's your hit points, your armor class, your weapon, some damage, maybe speed, probably not. But yeah, class and class level and race, and that pretty much is all your bullet points for your character. But then as the years go on and the craft builds up, it's just more and more stuff. People made this criticism early when the thief hit. It's like, well, I'm playing a fighter. Can I not try to move quietly? Can I not try to climb a wall? But because this other thing had it in a table with, some progressing numbers, that implies that it's boxed in to only that class, and that nobody else gets that ability, or else it would have been listed in your class description, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's probably all I got to say on that. You want to roll again?
Certainly. Your turn.
All right, let's see. Number 9, we got failures in communication between PCs that enhance the game. Take it away, Clayton.
All right, so I added this to the list because several sessions ago in my Wednesday group, my table, like many tables, has a big problem with what is said in character and what is said out of character. Not really, like, the players will sit around the table and say a whole lot of stuff, and then when I, the DM, ask them, did your character just say that thing in front of this NPC that they are talking with? Oh, no, that was out of character. That type of scenario is something that just leads to well, for one thing, it is, I feel like it's the players hedging their bets and making sure that they can do stuff without consequences in the game. But I've also seen it happen where, particularly between player characters, whenever there is a miscommunication, or somebody either hears wrong or doesn't hear something that has happened with another player character. And it can lead to some really cool player character interaction if you're willing to go down that route and play it up. Although I hate to use this as an example, like 95% of sitcoms and romantic comedy movies, this is the crux of the story that is going on. This is the conflict of the story, is that there is some sort of failure in communication between two characters, and that's where the drama lies. I have been a part of many games where the moment that it is revealed that there's been some sort of miscommunication and one player is acting on information that not necessarily stuff that they shouldn't know, but just something that they have remembered wrong or acted on, or either that they've remembered it wrong or they just weren't privy to the information to begin with and acting on incomplete information. I have been trying for a couple of years now, to try to continue playing up that failure in communication, because whenever it happens in game, there's an out of game conversation to quote correct the information so that everybody is on the same page. And then it just becomes something that is kind of glossed over and is no longer an issue in the game, where if it was played out in the course of the game, it would be a compelling story to play out. An example that I can think of is, Jordan, in our, now I can't remember the name of the game. The one that Kyle was running, where you were playing the rogue, the swashbuckler, the duelist, and I was playing the paladin. I don't remember exactly what caused it, but there was a miscommunication between our characters, and we didn't smooth it over. There was something that had either been said or done that I, as a player, misheard or didn't remember correctly. And it became a defining aspect of our character's relationship, because my character didn't let it go, because it was something that he incorrectly believed about your character. And it led to, I felt like, a much more rounded interaction between our characters.
This kind of thing is tough to pull off intentionally as a DM, because you're playing around with a very small resource, and that is the player's ability to remember things from session to session, especially over multiple sessions. If they remember the big highlights, you're doing well. But for little things like this, that, the idea is a small misunderstanding or miscommunication snowballs into some bigger issue. Trying to keep that alive for however long that takes to develop, that'd be pretty tough. And then I also wouldn't want to really fuck over some players due to that, because you got to keep in mind that you're playing a game, and you can only expect people to remember so much between one session or another. And they should take notes or whatever. Okay, fine, whatever. But even if you are a hard ass about some stuff like this, it's kind of a cheap shot when you do finally reveal, haha, you thought I said this, but instead I said that, and now the enemy's ambushing you, whatever. There's been a few instances where I saw that opportunity in our old school game that we've been playing, where it was clear that you guys had just forgot something, or somebody just misspoke and somebody ran with it. And there's been a few times where I've clarified on purpose, because I guess it just didn't seem like it was giving the players a fair shake, and taking into account that from the character's perspective, you had that conversation 3 minutes ago, not a week ago, where you had your job and your family and every other fucking thing in life between now and then to take up your bandwidth,
Yeah, there are definitely points where this should not be done. And, I think it's just a part of learning to be a better DM or GM, to learn and to be able to recognize when you're kind of being an asshole for allowing a miscommunication to continue. The particular instances where where I think it should be more appropriate to allow these miscommunications to continue is specifically whenever it is between two NPC or two player characters, and if the two player characters having a disagreement isn't going to be something that ends the game, if the players are able to keep it within the game, recognize that what happens in the game is not necessarily the reality of the players sitting around the game. Like, an insult said from one character to another isn't necessarily going to be something that is real between the players, and this is incumbent on the parties who are involved to be able to do that. I'm not saying that a character should be able to just insult another character without any sort of repercussions. But sometimes if everybody around the table is aware that what you're talking about in the game, what happens in the game, is everybody trying to create this more interesting interaction and story, I think you can sometimes strike gold with this, and it becomes just another thing to keep in mind and to watch out for whenever you think that you might be able to hit that gold.
Yeah, I gotcha. There's one thing you brought up earlier about this that I want to circle back to, and that's the out of character versus in character conversation and how that muddies the waters. I remember when I first started playing second edition with an actual group, not just me and my middle school or whatever friends figuring out or not even figuring out, but doing a shitty job at it. But when I actually sat down with an older group, and they've been playing for years and years, and they were sticklers about saying ahead of time, out of character, blah, 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 blah. Out of character, I say, blah, 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 blah. The assumption being everything out of your mouth that's not directly addressed to the DM in the form of like a rules question or some clarification on what your character is perceiving. Everything that is said just broadcast at the table is assumed to be something that your character is saying. And you have to specifically say when it's not. And I saw that bite people in the ass sometimes. Someone would go for a joke and, it would be in game in front of, someone that they didn't want to offend, but person gets offended because we're pretending that we're in some stuffy medieval, caste system. But the point being, it's really disruptive, I think. That kind of play where people are just like going for the joke and then, get back to whatever the fuck. Like, nobody's that funny to start with. Rarely do I see one of those like cheap, like hacky jokes, really like land super well. But it also just completely disrupts the whole flow of the game, and then takes up not just that time, but the time it takes to get back on track to whatever is going on. And then the clarification of all the shit around it. And, oh, I didn't actually mean that. No, of course I wouldn't actually say that in front of the king, and blah, blah, blah. Like, just don't. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just an asshole or something, and maybe people are showing up just to yuck it up. And if they're having fun, that's fine with me. Not the game I'm going to show up for. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I definitely fall more on your side with this. Our games, whenever we had a really good group that was very cohesive, and we all of us sitting around the table were friends, it would be like that, where you could get off on stuff being said out of character, and then half an hour or more could go by. It would go by until the DM said, hey, are we here to play this game? I don't want to say this is a negative thing, because it's a great thing to be able to have a group of people that you're hanging out with and doing all this. There's a line here, and I don't know where it is, but I am one of those DMs who once the out of character conversations have started, I start looking at the clock or checking my phone to see the time, to see how long is this going to go. And I give them a little bit of breathing room, because especially in a very intense game, a very dark and dour game that isn't really supposed to be about making jokes. Like if you're playing a Call of Cthulhu horror game or something like that, and there's really not a place at the table for those types of jokes, but you just got to let it happen for levity. I don't know. It's something that I haven't found where the proper balance is. I don't think that literally everything said at the table should be taken as happening in the game, but I do also feel like a majority of the things that are said, particularly jokes that are made about characters at the table, things that are said humorously, like comments about what is directly happening, those should be weighted a little bit more toward this is what is happening actually in the game.
Yeah, it's a group match thing. It's a read the room thing. A lot of nuance there. I do think that this is one of those places that playing online has actually improved stuff, because we can't just blurt out some stupid reference or, some bullshit joke spontaneously at the table and overtalk everybody else. If that happens online, of course, everything just becomes a garble, and, even your joke doesn't really get through. So I've noticed that people tend to only speak when they're either interacting with the DM as players or saying something in character.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've seen since COVID hit and people started interacting more online, and then once we come back to in-person stuff, I have noticed that there has been a greater shift of not necessarily less banter at the table, but more. There has been more focus on, or maybe not focus, but more just direct attention on, we're at the game, we're here to game.
That's interesting. I haven't played an in-person game since COVID stopped, but that's good to hear that's a trend. I don't think I have anything else really to riff on this one. You want to do another roll?
Yes, I will. Number 2, how to run a high-level or high-powered game. I'll go ahead and start talking about this. I think I've had a little bit more experience here, but probably not a whole lot. Jordan, did you ever play any of now I can't think of what it was called. It was the White Wolf quasi-medieval
Vampire of the Dark Ages?
No, it was where your characters were super powered. I don't remember the cause of. Give me just a second. I will actually look this up because it was a good game. I just don't remember what the game was called.
Are you talking about that one that was like anime inspired?
Yes.
I can't remember it either. I played like one session of a game one time. Yeah, everybody was like absurdly god level powered from what I remember. Like up there with like Superman or the Flash or something like that.
Exalted. That's the name of it.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That like I've never actually played Exalted, but I had one friend who joined an Exalted game. This was 20 years ago or more at this point. But he shows up like session 1 of this game. It was for his first session, but the other characters had been in the game for a little while, and they were just doing insane amounts of stuff. It was like each character was basically like a god, and his character included. He would like default characters in that setting are incredibly high powered, and they were doing like, as a newly created character, he could have done some of the stuff that in D&D is described in like the epic level handbook and stuff like that. That is one extreme of playing high-powered or high-level or high-powered games. But I would also say a lot of superhero games either can or are intentionally designed to be relatively high-powered. Like our game that didn't go very far, of the Necessary Evil game where you played the repeat suicide bomber.
Yeah, I've tried a few different superhero games over the years, and I don't think I've ever played more than maybe 3 sessions of a superhero game. I think for this very reason. People make their characters, and it's so easy for a X-Men or a Justice League or Avengers type of group to just be able to completely crush whatever is going on. I think it's largely because in the media that inspires the genre, the heroes are often doing very stupid things, but players in a TTRPG that have those abilities come up with like much better strategic approaches to problems than like, Captain America or whoever might.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is due to the fact that a lot of these characters, like in comics, they are written to be more than just an assemblage of powers. But if you're creating a character for a game, most of the time it just ends up being I'm fire guy, or I'm whatever. And every problem becomes, okay, how am I going to apply my particular suite of powers to solve the problem? Whereas in comics, you have a writer who is writing the scenario, and it is much easier to create a conflict in which it is a character-based conflict for these people who are superpowered, and creating a character-based conflict in like a D&D game for level 17 characters, if they haven't played from level 1 to 17, is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and I think by necessity, the descriptions, like the actual rules text of high-level spells or powers or whatever, has to be really vague, just because it encompasses so much. Like, look at the rules for Magneto-style, like, magnetic manipulation ability. There's a bazillion ways that could be cleverly applied that would just absolutely break the game. And a lot of times you see that those novel ideas being used as part of an interesting story that has to do with these characters. But when you try to put that into a game table kind of situation, it's a lot different than, a D6 damage per level or whatever the fuck. Gravity manipulation, force manipulation. Like, you've always got these weird things in high level D&D. You get into illusions and wish spells and like these extremely vague kinds of powers that it's like, okay, we are outside of the realm of some relationship between character level and monster hit dice and standard damage dice and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think that, like, particularly high level games and in a game system that you start relatively low powered and gain power as you advance. I have never been in a high powered game that started at high level and then was successful. I have been a part of a couple of, like back in 3rd edition, I was a part of a couple of games that started like at level 10 or something like that. And it's ridiculous the amount of stuff that a D&D character can do at level 10, not even factoring in what they could possibly do if you start at level 17 or 20. The problem that I most ran into it is the motivation. Why is your character doing all of this stuff? Because most of the adventures that exist for high level characters, they're basically just leveled up versions of the low level quests that you get whenever you're level 3 or 4. You're doing the exact same quest. It's just, you're just fighting higher level monsters, and you have access to suites of powers that are godlike. And I have never seen a high level game played where you started at high level. I've never seen it done successfully. I've never seen it done where it wasn't just that, where the numbers are higher than what you would have been whenever you were a 4th level character.
Yeah, I don't think I have either. It's tough even when playing through that, though. Like, I'm starting to see the beginnings of that in our D&D game, the difficulties of running more and more powerful groups. As you guys gain magic items, as you gain spells especially, it's going to be more and more difficult for me to present a regular challenge to you all. I've taken steps to try to control that a little bit, but like, you guys are average, I think, 4th level now. Some of you have hit 5th. I think there might be one 6th level character. I'm not sure. I'd have to look. But that's getting kind of up there on this old school scale. And the adventures that I'm wanting to run you guys through, I'm going through these old school adventures chronologically, and all of these early ones don't have any recommended level ranges for them. Nobody thought of that yet, I guess. So when I start getting into, In Search of the Unknown and Keep on the Borderlands and stuff like that are the first few TSR adventures, or even the giant stuff, though those are a little higher level. That probably won't be a problem. There's a lot of giants. But those like intro adventures, I'm going to have to beef those up quite a bit because you guys, I think, could probably waltz through most of those. But one thing that I think is worth keeping in mind is until 3rd edition, player characters in Dungeons and Dragons did not get additional hit dice beyond about 9th or 10th level or so. I think some of it depended on the class, but roundabout in there, you stopped getting more hit dice of hit points, and you'd go up by like maybe 1 or something every level thereafter. And of course, it was insanely expensive to level up each time to get there. So I think it was a mistake in 3rd edition, and it's carried through ever since, to continue piling on hit points beyond a fixed level. That's let characters be as powerful and do as many cool things as you want, but if they get stomped by a frost giant or something, that should hurt. I don't care who you are,
Yeah. Addressing that very specific issue, back in 3rd edition, there was an alternate set of rules floating around. I want to say it was called E6, like Epic 6th, in which your characters stopped leveling at level 6. So fighters got their second attack and they didn't actually level up beyond that. What you did was you could spend experience points in order to purchase additional abilities, like be able to purchase additional feats and stuff. And your hit points didn't change after level 6, and your base attack bonus didn't go up after level 6. Spellcasters could use the points that they were accumulating to purchase the ability to cast more powerful spells, but also their spells were capped at 3rd level spells. So there is nobody in the world running around casting anything more powerful than a fireball. It was a very interesting rule set that I never actually played, but I downloaded it and read it, and I was always intrigued by it to see how well that would work as a campaign, mostly because very few of my games ever went beyond level 6 because I just got tired of playing the same characters at that point. And as a DM, I mean, it was designed to address the issue of the DM not being able to present challenges for higher level parties beyond just monsters with more hit points. And hit points are not the challenges that you are facing whenever you get to high level should not just be how many hit points the monsters have, and how long it takes you to go through them just gets longer and longer.
Yeah, that's by far the most boring way to challenge players, is just add more hit points. But that reminds me, in the same era, was one of my favorite like alternate versions of D20. I think D20 Modern might have had something like this, if I recall, but I remember it most from the Star Wars D20 game of that era. They had vitality points, which were exactly the same as hit points, but then you also had wound points, which were just based on whatever your con stat was. And whenever you got critted, or whenever you ran out of vitality points, you would start taking wound point damage, which was actual physical trauma to your body. And when that went to 0, you were dead. That was really cool that there's this, like, you get that layer of like kind of dodging and lucking out of stuff and whatever the abstraction of hit points is supposed to represent. But then if somebody really nails you with a crit, or has been wearing you down blow after blow, there's an actual physical representation of damage that is fixed. It's just whatever your con score is, no matter what your level. So if you get a crit with a blaster pistol or whatever on Darth Vader, that guy's going to drop. And I think that's super cool. I really wish they bring that back for whatever the fuck they're going to call 6th edition or whatever. Actually, I don't give a fuck. I'm not going to play that game anyhow, but you know what I mean. I think it's good design.
Yeah. Relating to in our old school D&D game, now that we're getting up to approaching level 6, whether or not somebody is actually level 6 or is going to be getting there soon, quote soon, because of how long it takes to get experience. One of the things that in reading the books looks like it was an important part of high level D&D back in the day, and it's fallen away, is kingdom management. Like you're a fighter and you have a fort or you have a stronghold. That's something that I'm really looking forward to getting into with our old school game, now that we're close enough that I can almost taste it.
Yeah, and I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I would like to see it, but it also, I think somewhere in there, it just necessitates character retirement or, putting a character on the back burner and starting a new character, because you're not going to be adventuring as much when your concerns are in keeping up with your manor and your village and yada yada. It's a different game. I don't know if it's going to be more fun or less fun. I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around how that's going to work, because I have to imagine that if this is just a big like Sim Kingdom kind of thing, some portion of the players are going to tune out and they're going to want to continue just doing their, solo adventure kind of way of life, whereas others are really going to get into being like a noble lord and, getting vassals and taxes and whatever.
Well, I'm definitely one of the players who's going to really enjoy that. I'm just hoping that all of the hirelings that have died along the way, knowledge of all of their deaths hasn't made it back to civilization to negatively impact our ability to recruit people for our fledgling fiefdoms.
Y'all definitely blow through some hirelings.
Goddamn right. And I do my best to keep them alive, but man, it's so hard.
They're squishy. They're not really meant to go down in there with you, I don't think. I think they're meant to stay up top with the horses and guard the baggage and stuff. But you guys put them in harm's way.
Yeah, we're definitely not supposed to be putting them on the front lines.
Yeah, people are going to hear about you all.
Well, I mean, it can't be anything worse than any of the other shit our characters have done at this point.
Exactly. Lucky for you all, you've been at the edge of civilization, learning how to do this stuff. So there's not a lot of communication back and forth between Blackmore and the rest of Greyhawk, it seems, at least not in any source I've ever seen. So maybe you guys can just do like they used to in the olden days and, really raise hell in one area and then just move over to the next town where no one can identify you and change your names and start over fresh.
Hey, it worked in the Old West.
Exactly.
So we are damn near an hour. Once I cut off the beginning of this, we'll be at an hour here in the next couple of minutes. Do you want to do another one, or do you want to go on to Geek Things?
Let's go on to Geek Things. I think we got a pretty good overview of some stuff there, and anything else I'm going to want to dive into here will probably take more than 5 or 10 minutes. So, all
right. I'll go ahead and start Geek Things. I've been watching a YouTube channel that I recently discovered called the Templin Institute. It is investigating alien worlds, and it analyzes organizations in fiction, particularly sci-fi organizations and settings. There's a lot of things analyzing different aspects of society and tech and things like that, from things like Star Trek, Star Wars, Warhammer 40K, any big sci-fi property. There are parts of it where they have gone in and analyzed it to see how feasible it would be for this, or how it would how things would be if in our real world we had access to these sorts of things. It's a channel I really enjoy. I like a lot of the thought experiments that they propose. So I would recommend the Templin Institute on YouTube.
Let's see. My geek thing, I guess I'll go with just over the last few days, I've somehow just kind of tripped upon this deep well of really old short films to do with like fantasy stuff, all made by, let me mangle some French here, Georges Méliès, say. Most famous for A Trip to the Moon, which I think everybody's probably at least seen that, famous shot of the guy's face in the moon that's all like cheesy looking and the bullet lands right in its eye. Old school shit. We're talking like turn of the century, like 1900s kind of film, earliest stuff. These movies are a minute to 15 minutes long or whatever. But they're awesome. Like, they're so imaginative, and most of them are, sci-fi or fantasy related in some way. And they've got these great backdrops that are like hand painted, and given how completely in the cradle filmmaking was at the time, these things are extraordinary. There's one I watched earlier, The Astronomer's Dream. Trippy as fuck. A wizard in a castle with a telescope and a weird face thing starts eating everything. Another one that I watched that I thought was absolutely awesome. It's called The Witch. It's about this guy that goes to see this witch, and it's unclear what the whole plot is because it's silent, and they don't even have like the break for like the text cards from time to time. You just have to sort of like watch them pantomime out these scenarios. But he kind of scams this witch by giving her a bag of sand that's supposed to be gold, I think. And she's got this magic dagger, which I guess is a poignard is how they say it in French. The fatal poignard is a magic item that the witch makes to get revenge on him for scamming her while he's off trying to save this lady who captured somehow. This thing is it's a knife that gets like thrown and turns into this like rocket knife. It's like flames coming from the back of it. There's all these great monsters, these like dragons and stuff like that show up. All like very campy and like kind of stage play scale, effects or whatever. But it's just really cool to watch this stuff. I had no idea how many of these things there were. But yeah, as far as like early fantasy film, it doesn't get any earlier than this. Definitely worth a watch. I think almost all this stuff is available free on YouTube. So Georges Méliès.
Yeah. You were bringing back a lot of great memories. Yeah, I've seen a lot of those. I took an intro to film class in college, and it specialized in basically pre-sound, so the entire silent era. And there's a lot of really good, really, really interesting fantasy stories that came out in the cradle of filmmaking, and it's amazing to go back and watch. And yeah, they're all available for free because they're all in the public domain now. If we have it now, it is available on YouTube that you can go watch. Everything that has been rediscovered or has been able to be restored from old film. It's all in the public domain, so you can watch it guilt free if that's something you worry about. But yeah, there's a hell of a lot of gold there for just entertainment, but especially for like coming up with ideas for games. So since you brought that up as your geek thing, I want to throw out a second geek thing. You reminded me of it. There's a silent era film trilogy based on The Golem of Prague. It came out in the mid 19 teens. there were a trilogy of films, but I think only one of them still remains that where we actually have it. If you can find that, watch it. I'll see if I can put a link to it in the show notes. But yeah, watch The Golem.
Was that also a Méliès movie, or is that somebody else?
No, this was later.
Cool.
This was a I want to say it was a German. I think it was part of the German expressionist that like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari came out of. Yeah. The original Nosferatu. Those are kind of in the same zeitgeist. Gotcha.
I have to look that one up.
All right, Jordan, what do you say we stop this bullshit and start rolling some dice?
We've been rolling dice.
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.